Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.
Wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. Listen, it's really a privilege for me to have a few minutes with you here this morning. At least it's this morning where I am, to talk to you a little bit about building an all-in culture. You know, it's really interesting. My co-author Adrian Gostick and I have written a lot about how to create a best-in-class workplace. You know, a workplace where people feel engaged and feel valued. And we started our work in reward and recognition, about how to reward and recognize your employees to drive engagement. But before we jump in, I love LinkedIn. I don't know how many of you are on LinkedIn, but Adrian and I write quite frequently for LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you there. We'll have some Q&A here at the end of the session. But if you ever want to reach out with any questions about how to create a better workplace where you are, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It would be a pleasure. As I mentioned, we started our work in reward and recognition. We found there was great power when people felt valued at work. I do something well, my manager, my supervisor notices it and he celebrates it. He or she celebrates it with me. And it was really interesting, Ali, is that as we started to go down that path and work with companies more intimately, you know, doing some training and consulting that we do through our training company, people would often tell us, you know, it's great to be rewarded and recognized, but if we don't have the right culture, it doesn't matter. And so that's what kind of led us to talk about what is culture, what makes a great culture at work. And we found that culture was quite an emotional connection. You know, when you think about the best job you've ever had, and you think about when you woke up in the morning, how you felt going to work, right? Were you excited? How did you feel about your coworkers, your boss, and so on? And then think about the worst job you ever had and how that was so much different, right? You didn't feel energized. You didn't feel valued. You didn't really want to go to work. You didn't feel good about your industry. And so as we started to look at the data and the case studies, when we came to talk about culture, we found that it was very much an emotional connection to work. Well, I want to talk to you this morning, not just about that emotion, but I want to talk to you about various companies, case studies that we had, the research behind what we do. Adrian and I are very much focused on what does the research tell us, where does it lead us. And then I want to talk to you, what you've got on the screen now is the transferable model. Okay, so if I give you the data, that's an interesting data point, right? If I give you a case study, it's just an interesting story. But this transferable model then gives you the how-to. What is it that I can do today or tomorrow to make my business better than it was yesterday? And so we're going to be talking about what we call the all-in roadmap. Now, we thought really long and hard about the subtitle of our book, and it's how the best that drives big results. Again, that belief part. Good leaders, good managers inspire their employees into this belief that what I do is important, that what I do is valued. The research was the largest study ever done in the workplace culture. It was done for us by Towers Watson. It was 2009, 2010. And actually, it begs the question, how large was it? Well, it was a 2-year study of over 300,000 people. And by the way, this wasn't a study that was only done in North America. It was a study that was very much international, over 20 different countries around the world. So as we're talking, I don't want you to think that this is an American-centric or North American-centric kind of study, not by any means. Very much an international validated study, and 300,000 surveys is way more than you would need for any kind of credibility. The accuracy is plus or minus 0.05%. So feel good about the fact that the study is valid. The survey sample base was large. And here's some of the conclusions we came to. And some of them are very simple and some of them are very intuitive, but this idea that everyone deserves a great place to work. Now, as we started to do more and more work around why is it important to have a great place to work. And Ali, I'm hoping I can bring you into the conversation here a little bit. I've only been to Saudi Arabia once. I was in Riyadh for a conference, and so let me ask you this question, if you can pipe in. Why do you think that having a great place to work for your employees could be a competitive advantage? Why would you think that would be a competitive advantage, Ali?
Well, I mean, number one thing comes into my mind is retention. So.
Exactly. You know, if I have a great place to work, why would I leave? You know, in this war for talent and trying to attract great people, I want to keep them. Can you think of anything else?
Well, other thing is, I mean, the environment and the ergonomics itself makes you comfortable, so you obviously you feel more productive, I mean, in the environment that you're working in.
You know, very insightful. When you feel good at work, when you feel valued at work, you are more productive. And here's another thing that I'll throw out, is that it helps to attract great talent. Not only does it keep good talent, but when you're on that list of one of the best places to work in whatever part of the world you are, studies have shown that when you have a reputation of being a great place to work, you get 3 to 4 times the number of applicants. It's a bigger talent pool. So not only is it a nice thing to do, right, but it gives you a business and very much a competitive advantage when it comes to attracting talent. Great insights, Ali. Well, we looked at what is the definition of an all-in culture, small group or organization division, but here are the key words. I believe what I do matters, and I make a difference. And I always like to add to that definition. And when I make a difference, it's noticed and it's celebrated. I'm valued for my work. Now, engagement is a big part of what we do, about getting our people all in. And we love to ask leaders these 2 questions. Are you all in, right? Because if you're not all in, if you're not committed, then the odds of you getting your people committed goes way down. It makes sense, doesn't it? So working with various companies literally all over the world, we would ask this question. Look, as you're building your culture, as you're building your brand, what are some of your favorite brands? And it was interesting, as I was doing a seminar, and it was an all-day seminar in Cairo not too long ago. I was asking this group, and I didn't know the brands in Egypt. It was my first trip there. What are some of your favorite brands? And it was really interesting. One of the leaders there said, you know what? My favorite brand is my family. And I thought that was a wonderful insight into his culture, right? And so here's the obligatory and gratuitous picture of my family. That's my lovely wife Heidi there in the orange t-shirt, and my 4, exceptional children. And I thought, isn't it interesting that when we talk about culture, the first place we learn about culture is with our families. We learn to collaborate. We learn to give in. We learn teamwork. We learn how to get things done. We learn how to thank each other. We learn how to get mad at each other. And so I thought that was really a great answer and very appropriate when you think about it. Well, think about some of the great brands that maybe you've had some experience with. Maybe you've been on Singapore Airlines. You've been to a Disney, amusement park. Maybe you use Apple products, or you've been to Starbucks. All cultures that have great brands, very, very productive, great reputations. And it's interesting, as you see those logos, right? I think that there are certain emotions that come to mind. You think of Starbucks, you think of the great coffee or the intimate service. You think of Singapore Airlines and the comfort and ease with which you do that. Apple products, the innovation and so on. I'm a huge fan of Apple myself. And it does beg the question that when people see your logo, what is the emotional attachment there? This is the logo of my company, The Culture Works. We make work more rewarding. We engage people at work. Our mission is to make a difference so that everybody has a great place to work. And I want you to think about this a little bit too. It's not just how your customers react to your logo, but how do your employees react to your logo? Are they proud to tell people this is where they work? Are they proud to talk about how they impact the community, the environment, the business world? That logo is an emotional umbilical cord, right? And when we have high ethics, when we've got great products, when we make a difference, our employees and our customers are proud to be associated with us. We see this in the recession, in the downturn, in finance in particular, in banking. If the bank's ethics or they've been a contributor to the downturn in the economics of our country or community, then all of a sudden that great reputation that's represented by that logo completely disappears. So this idea of nurturing the culture, making sure the brand is strong, that the logo stands for integrity, customer service, innovation, whatever it is, becomes very, very important. Well, back to the roadmap. We're not going to have time to go through everything in the roadmap, but I did want to start with the center of the roadmap and what we call the 3 E's, being engaged, enabled, and energized, okay? And we found some really interesting data in the research here. First off, the definition. I'm engaged at work. I give extra effort, right? I'm enabled in my work, an environment that supports productivity. As Ali mentioned, I've got an ergonomic chair. I feel comfortable at work. I feel safe at work. And then energized, this sense of well-being, of health and wellness. I make a difference. There's that emotional connection, right? And here's what we found was interesting along engagement. In low engagement companies, the operating margin was about 10%, right? High engagement companies, productivity, the operating margin jumped up to 14.3%. But in companies with high engagement, high enablement, and high energy, productivity literally doubles. And that was a wonderful aha. That was a wonderful insight in that, yes, it's important to engage our employees, no question about it. But when we can give them the tools to do their job and we can engage them emotionally, productivity literally doubles. So what does it mean to be engaged at work? This was part of a study we did again with Towers Watson in our book, The Carrot Principle. And we found that, and again, this was done in 20 countries around the globe, that the number one driver of engagement was opportunity and well-being. I have a chance to grow and develop, right? I've got a sense that people at work appreciate me and I feel valued. Number 2 was trust. Number 3 was pride in that corporate or the logo of the company. I saw the logo, I felt good about our work and what we were doing. So that was interesting to us, but we wanted to know, what are the drivers of the drivers? Number 1 driver of pride in the organization, goal setting and accountability. In other words, we keep our promises, right? Number 1 driver of trust was communication. I know what's going on around here. I'm trusted. My manager tells me what's going on. But fascinatingly enough, the number 1 driver of the number 1 driver was this idea of I feel appreciated. I feel valued. Now, we engaged a lot of really smart, statistical analysis, PhDs and people that really know how to take the numbers and then interpret them. And so one of the questions we asked them was, could you be highly engaged at work without feeling valued, without feeling appreciated? And the PhDs told us it was almost statistically impossible to have high engagement without being appreciated. And so we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. How do we, in a great culture, reward, recognize, and appreciate our people? So what does it mean to be enabled at work? I think that this is best explained in a story. And it goes like this. My co-author, Adrian Gostick, has a son, Tony. When Tony was a teenager, he had an iPod. You can see there on the slide. And the iPod stopped working. So they went to their local Apple store. And if those who've been to an Apple store, it's an amazing experience, right? And they said, look, my son's iPod has stopped working. Maybe you can help me do that Genius Bar thing, fix it. Well, he says, sure, let me take a look at it. And as he's playing with the iPod, he moves it from one hand to the next and then drops it. And it clatters off the floor. It bangs off the cement floor. And he says, oh, I am so sorry. Let me go to the back and get you a new one. So he goes to the back, the inventory, grabs a new iPod, comes out, gives it to Tony, and says, Tony, enjoy your new iPod. Well, Adrian says, gosh, how do I pay for that? He says, no, I dropped it. It's my mistake. We're going to replace it free of charge. And Adrian says, well, wait a minute. It wasn't working when I came in. I'm pretty sure it wasn't working from your hand all the way to the floor. I'm happy to pay for it, because he thought it was going to come out of his pay. And the young man, immediately said, no, don't misunderstand. It's not going to come out of my pay. This is our policy. If we drop it and we bang it up, we replace it. That's just our policy. We want you to be happy. Please enjoy your new iPod. And I just started to laugh with Adrian. I said, that is a great story of an employee that is completely and totally enabled, that when he's made a mistake, can correct that mistake immediately, right? And then I also said, by the way, if I were you, I'd go back to that same store the next day and talk to that same kid and hand him my laptop and hope that he drops it so that you can get a new one, right? But I love the story about he knew what he could do. Now, I'm fascinated with Apple stores, and we have one near our home. And so I've talked to the managers there often. And I said, I related the story to him. He says, absolutely, that's our policy. Our people know exactly what they can do. And by the way, they know exactly what they can't do, which is even more important. So that when a mistake is made, we can recover quickly, we protect the brand, we protect our integrity, and our customers have an amazing experience. So what I would ask you is, do your employees know what they can and what they can't do? Do they know the rules of engagement? Do they know what they can replace? Because one of the things that you can do to disengage your employees and to disengage your customers is make a promise that you can't keep. And so I thought it was a wonderful way to explain enablement at work. And then the other is, how do you energize your people? How do you get that going? Well, great managers help their people believe. They're great storytellers. They paint the picture of why what we do is important. We make a difference. We're creating, good paying jobs. We're supporting our local businesses. Whatever industry or business you are in, do your people understand not just the what and the how of what you do, but the why? And by the way, Ali, one of the things that we found really fascinating is this is more important to the younger generation coming into the workplace than ever. I think we all have a sense that we want to know that what we do matters. But the young people coming into the workplace now, this becomes more and more important to them. What is the why of what we do? And hopefully that makes sense to you. Well, we've got about 15, 20 minutes to go here. And so rather than try to rush through the entire model, what I thought I would do is take one of the 7 steps, and it's we cheer for each other, we celebrate each other's successes, and go a little deeper there and give you a couple of takeaways, some things you can do today and tomorrow to make for a better workplace. Again, back to what drives engagement. Remember that appreciation part. It's the #1 driver of opportunity and well-being, which is the #1 driver of engagement in the workplace. So we actually kind of call it our secret sauce. We never looked at and we never found a workplace or a team or an organization that was highly productive, that had great engagement results and customer service results, that didn't have a high level of reward and recognition, appreciation, and value in the workplace. Now, Ali, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here in just a little bit. So as you're looking at this spectrum, we call it, on the one side, you've got the low-cost recognition, verbal thank yous, handwritten notes. I may take you to lunch. I may pull you up in front of the team during a team meeting and praise you for your great work. And you'll notice underneath the big arrow there, it tends to be more frequent, it tends to be lower cost, and it reaches more people. As you start going, more to the right-hand side, performance awards, team celebrations, length of service, sales awards, and so on. Now you're getting into the less frequent, higher cost. There may be an award, a plaque, you're giving away a trip, there's cash bonuses, stock options, whatever it is that you might do in your organization. So here's my question for you, Ali. As you look at this spectrum, which end of the spectrum do you think has a higher impact on your culture? Is it the more frequent low-cost appreciation, or is it the more expensive, less frequent, high-cost recognition? What would be your guess on this one, Ali?
Uh, well, that's a
Are you
tough
there?
one. Yes, I'm here. Well, obviously, one cannot ignore the low cost, more on a frequent basis that you receive such words of appreciation from your line managers or boss. However, obviously, the higher cost appreciation, particularly if you talk about our culture, I would say the performance award stands still in the top. Also, I mean that is where the people are actually more motivated, I guess.
Okay, I think that's great insight. And I would agree with you that I think that when we get one of those big awards, we're the employee of the year or we're the top salesperson, that really does have a huge impact on us. But here's what we found, and this might be interesting for our listeners today, is that if you don't have a lot of frequent and low-cost recognition, if you don't have a lot of the daily affirmation, when you get to the big awards, it has less impact. And here's what I mean by that. I can't have a terrible experience every day and feel less valued every day. And then at the end of the year, at the big annual banquet, be celebrated, and you make up for 364 days of really feeling horrible at work. So they really do play together. If I feel appreciated on a daily basis, if the ongoing experience is really good, then when I'm celebrated at the end of the year, it's more impactful. So often what we found, Ali, is that companies were really good at the annual banquet, but not so good at the day-to-day. And it didn't create the culture they wanted. So interestingly enough, the low-cost stuff had a bigger impact on culture because it was ongoing. Culture is something you build every day. And then when it came to the big celebration at the end of the year, that was a big deal and had huge impact. Now, Ali, does that make sense to you? Does that put it in perspective a little better?
Well, absolutely, yes. I totally agree. Also, as I
What do you,
mentioned, that we cannot ignore the frequent low-cost appreciations. Obviously, this on a daily basis it boosts your motivation and morale. And I totally agree. If such bits of appreciation is not given on daily basis, end of the day, just one large bonus will not do an effect.
Exactly. So no, your insights I think were spot on. You can't ignore one at the expense of the other. You can't just say, hey, we're going to have a great annual banquet and we're not going to do anything else during the year. And vice versa. You can't just say, hey, all anybody ever needs is a thank you or a handwritten note. There are people that do extraordinary work and you need to celebrate that. So wonderful insights. Well, so often people say this is the soft stuff of being a leader. Recognition is the soft stuff. I do the hard stuff. But what I'm here to share with you is when you get the soft stuff right, the hard stuff gets easier. And in fact, look at this. Appreciation in organizations where their organization recognizes excellence. That's the question at the bottom. When they recognize excellence, return on equity is 3 times higher in organizations that appreciate, value, and engage their employees. Now, so how do you do that? I want to relate to a wonderful story. We found a manager at Avis Rental Car in Dallas, Texas. His name is Carlos Aguilera. And by every measure, he is the top manager in all of the Avis world. He has high engagement, high customer satisfaction, high profitability. And so I asked Carlos, of all your best practices, what is the thing that you do that has the biggest impact? And he said, without question, it's 10 pennies. And I said, what do you do with 10 pennies? He said, well, when I grew up in business, my managers were always very keen to point out what I did wrong, very slow to point out what I did right. And I didn't want to be that kind of manager. So to remind myself, I put 10 pennies in my left pocket every day. And I set a goal to have 10 positive interactions with my people every day. Again, the high frequency, low cost. It could be a phone call. It could be pulling them aside and telling them they've done a great job. It could be having a team meeting and highlighting someone's particularly good customer service. And every time that happens, he moves a penny from his left pocket to his right pocket. He says, if I get to lunch and I still have 8 pennies in my left pocket, I'm not doing my job. Now, I would challenge those of you that are listening. to do that, because 10 is a lot. To have 10 positive interactions, you have to actually be with your people. You have to know them well enough to give them a call. And so what was interesting is Avis, as a company here in the United States, adopted that philosophy. They had a bus tour, and the message was to all the employees, you are appreciated. Whether you're an on-airport driver, a mechanic, a sales rental agent, or a check-in agent, the message is you are important. Because they knew this simple truth that the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. Let me say that again. The customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. So we want to create as good an employee experience as we possibly can so that that translates to our customers. Well, the results, they did this in 2012. The increase was 32%, $1.9 billion. I mean, that's real growth. They took that money, they bought back their independent franchisees in the UK and in Northern Europe and Southern Europe, and brought them into the Avis We Try Harder culture. Well, when they had to bring the people in Spain into the new culture, who did they send? They sent Carlos Aguilera. What did he take with him? 10 pennies. Now, I know you don't have pennies in a lot of places, but 10 tokens, 10 somethings that you can put in your pocket to remind yourself. And by the way, when Carlos shows up to his people, they're pretty happy to see him. They pretty are. Well, little webcast poll, you can kind of do this in your head, but what do you think? I'm going to ask you this question. I'll give you the quiz, Ali. What ratio do you think is a positive workplace? What is the ideal ratio in the workplace? Is it 1 to 1? You know, for every compliment there's a criticism. Is it 2 compliments to 1 criticism? 3 compliments to 1 criticism? Or 5 compliments to 1 criticism? What do you think, Ali? What would be your guess?
What ratio of positive to negative is the ideal in the workplace?
Right. Is it
5
1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5?
D, 5 to 1.
5 to 1. You are exactly right. It's 5 to 1. Now, I want to tell you an interesting story. I was doing this with some executives in Singapore, and I asked them, "What do you think the ratio should be?" And one of the leaders said, "I think it should be 1 to 1 because that's balance. For every compliment you give someone, you should give a criticism because that's balance." And here's what I said to him, Ali. I said, "You know what? Just for fun, try that at home and see how that works out for you. Try that with your spouse." Can you imagine if your personal relationship was a 1 to 1 positive to negative? I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm taking my wife out to a beautiful restaurant, right? And we all get dressed up in our finest clothes, and she comes down the stairs and says to me, "Honey, how do I look?" And I say, my wife's name's Heidi. I say, "Heidi, you know what? That dress, that blue color just makes your eyes sparkle, just sparkle. However, it does make you look fat, but your eyes sparkle, but the dress does make you look fat." What do you think the odds are of us getting to that restaurant, right? A 1 to 1 ratio in the workplace is profoundly negative. 2 to 1 is negative. 3 to 1 is neutral. 4 to 1 becomes positive, but the ideal is 5 to 1. In fact, the Harvard School of Business found that the ideal ratio is 5.6 to 1. So my challenge for those of you listening is, what is your ratio at work? Are you the one that's quicker to criticize and look for fault? Or are you like Carlos Aguilera, that's actually more prone to find out what's going right and reinforce that positive behavior? You know, we did some focus groups with a hotel chain in Canada. And one of the employees said, "You know, when I make a mistake, I'm recognized 100% of the time. But when I do something great, I'm not recognized 99% of the time." I love that when managers come up and say, "Hey, Ali, can I talk to you for just a second, just you and me in my office, just one-on-one, a little chat," right? Our immediate reaction is, "I've done something wrong," right? I've done something wrong. It's not, "Oh my gosh, there's going to be a surprise party for me. They're going to give me more plaques. They're going to give me a trip to Dubai. It's going to be spectacular." No, we're wired to be negative. It's a survival instinct. So what is your ratio at work? When you show up, are your employees glad to see you, or do they go into a defensive mode? Because how people feel at work is the workplace environment. It is your culture. Well, so how do you do it? Well, we got another 5 or 6 minutes here, and I want to give you a couple of more takeaways. Hopefully you've got 2 so far. 1, what is your ratio positive to negative at work? And the other one is 10 pennies. And actually the third one is where are you on that recognition spectrum? Are you doing enough day to day as opposed to just year end? Well, what we found is best-in-class managers, when it came to rewarding and recognizing their employees, they did it now, they did it often, they were specific in their praise, and they were sincere. And here's what I mean by that. Do it now. If you're an employee, rewarded behavior gets repeated. And the closer the reward is to the behavior, the more likely it is to be repeated. If I do something great today and I'm recognized today, I'm more likely to do it tomorrow. If I do something great today and a month goes by before you notice and you celebrate it, the impact is markedly less. The closer the recognition is to the behavior, the more likely it is to be repeated. And we know this, right, in sports. The World Cup, the greatest trophy in all of sports, right? Whole countries shut down to watch their countries play in the World Cup. When you win the World Cup, they give you the trophy right away. They don't say, hey, go get changed, put on a nice suit, or we'll give out the trophy at the end of the year, we'll bring everybody together. No, you want it now, whether it's ice hockey or it's Wimbledon or it's the Olympics, right? Or American baseball. You win the trophy, you get it now. So be very careful with when you see good behavior to make sure that you recognize it right away. I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. So the hockey gold medal to me is the best. Here's the Canadian hockey team getting their gold medal. That year, the women's hockey team won the gold medal. I mean, they are just ecstatic, overjoyed. Nobody remembers who finishes second, right? Unless, of course, you're the American hockey team. Happy, sad. Happy, sad, right? We win, we're happy. We lose, we're sad. Happy, sad. Now, if you're Canadian, that's very funny, by the way. We love when we can beat the U.S. at anything, right? Well, the next step is do it often. And again, back to what's your ratio at home. I think in our personal lives, we get this. A healthy relationship has much more positive impact than negative. And I would ask you, for those of you that are listening that are madly in love, ask yourself this question. How often do you tell that person you love them? If you're madly in love, if you've got a great marriage, I've been happily married for 32 years now, 32 years this month, actually. And I will tell you, I am more in love with my wife now than I have ever been. And there is not a day goes by that I don't tell my wife that I love her. Whether we're texting, whether it's an email or a phone call, I never leave the house that I don't tell her that I love her. I never, finish a conversation that I don't tell her that I love her. That's just healthy, right? So knowing that in your personal relationship, I love you has such a huge impact, think about it this way. I love you in your personal life is thank you in the workplace. And if it is sincere and specific, you can never hear it too much. Now, in the workplace, remember that every person that's working for you, there's a community behind them, right? There's a family, there's a spouse, there's children, there's parents. And when you appreciate me in the workplace, that's great. But you appreciate my family, that's huge. Let me give you a quick example. I was working for a guy named Kent Murdoch, my CEO at the time. And I traveled quite a bit. And I'll never forget, I was at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., and we were on the phone. I had my backpack, my wheelie, we're talking, solving some customer's problem. I hang up. My phone rings again, caller ID tells me it's my wonderful wife, Heidi. And she says to me, Chess, you're not going to believe what just happened. A guy just dropped off 24 beautiful long-stemmed orange roses to the house. Now, she said, at first I thought they were from you. And of course I knew they weren't, and I was curious who they were from. Well, you can see in the picture there's a note. And the note was from my CEO, Kent Murdoch. And it said something like this. Heidi, thanks for taking care of all the big things at home, so Chester can do big things on the road for us. The sacrifice isn't lost on us. Enjoy the flowers. All the best, Kent. Now think about that for a minute. He knows we love flowers and roses in particular. And he sent us 24 orange roses. See, we wrote a book called The 24 Carat Manager. So 24 is kind of our number. Carrots, generally speaking, are orange. So orange is our color. Those little things meant the world to us. So how do you think it made me feel about working for Ken? 2 thumbs up, right? But more importantly, how do you think it made my wife feel about me being on the road and away from home for Ken? Again, 2 thumbs up. So don't forget, don't just engage your employees, but what are you doing to engage their families, to appreciate them, those people that support your workers at home? We'll never forget that. We'll never forget it. It was a wow experience. What are you doing to wow your employees? Create that great workplace. Well, be specific. Now, general praise has no impact. If you think you're being the great motivator saying, hey, great job, great job, great job, guess again, right? It really does come down to, that was a great job because, be very specific. Tell them why. Again, remember, rewarded behavior gets repeated. So be very specific about the kind of behavior that you saw so that they can replicate it again. Well, all this recognition should be aligned with your mission, vision, and values, right? We are extraordinary in customer service or on-time delivery or innovative products or the best value in the market. Tie it to that because, again, those are the behaviors that are going to be repeated. And that becomes sincere. Tell me the story, give me the details, and it'll be sincere. If I'm too general, great job, great job, great job, has no impact. So do it now, do it often, be specific, and be sincere. And there are a lot of different things. An idea week. In our book, All In, we've got a chapter on, 52 ways to engage your employees. An idea a week. A letter to the family. Take them to lunch. A handwritten note. Tickets to a movie or a play. A Rolex watch. That's always a great one. Nothing says I love you quite like Rolex. But just a simple pat on the back. A simple pat on the back. I noticed what you did, and it was a great job. Well, one of my favorites as we kind of start to wrap up here, because I know we want to save, about 15 or 20 minutes here for Q&A, is the power of a handwritten note. For those of you, that are listening, think about when the last time was you got a handwritten note. My guess is at some point in your career you got one. Think about the impact it had on you. I'm willing to bet that many of you kept it. You posted it in your cubicle, you put it in your journal or whatever. And we found that a good thank you note, again, told them exactly what they did right. They tied it to a value or goal, how it impacted the organization with sincere appreciation. It wasn't just, hey, Ali, great job, Chester. It was, Ali, thanks so much for your hard work on that webinar. Making sure that the technology worked, making sure that we had, people signed up, making sure that it went into our bank of webinars so that those that couldn't attend today could listen to it later. That's what when we talk about a great webinar, that's a great webinar. Thanks so much. See, very specific, exactly what happened, and then a token. I've got the thank you card. I've got the thank you note. And by the way, I would challenge you to do it to three notes a week for 3 weeks. Get into the habit of doing it. I have a routine where, at the end of the week in my travels, I've collected the business cards, I've collected the contact information. I sit down and it takes me, 15, 20 minutes. I can write 4 or 5 thank you notes, put them in the mail, people get them. And here's another tip: do it with your family. When was the last time you wrote a love note to your spouse, or put a little note in your child's backpack? I have 2 sons that are away at university. I write them every Sunday night, right? And then they write me back every now and again. It's not quite as frequent, but my son Brendan wrote me back one time and he said, Dad, I love getting your letters in the mail. When that orange envelope shows up, right, because that's our color. I know it's a letter from my dad. And he said, I don't read it right away. Sometimes I'll save it for when I'm having a tough day, because I know after I read a letter from my dad, I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm telling you, it's a lost art. And if you'll get in the habit of writing these notes to your employees, to your customers, to families and friends, you'll be shocked at the impact it has. Well, as we're looking again at this roadmap, and you can see rooting for each other and cheering for each other, it's a great way for step 7 to hold your people accountable in a positive way. It's a great way to let you know you're partnering with your talent I'm sharing the credit. I'm sharing the glory. And we also found that, again, it has high impact on engagement. It has high impact on energy, all things that contribute to this high performance culture. Well, as we start to wrap up here, never forget that you own the culture, and you own it every day. The way that you come into the office, the way you interact with people, the ratio of your positive to negative conversations and observations. Think about how people feel when you walk in the door. Do they feel energized? Do they feel valued or not? Because that is your culture, and it's something that happens every day. Well, I did want to take just a minute or two and talk to you about our latest book. It's called What Motivates Me. And in that book, there is a wonderful motivators assessment. What we found is that unless you understand people's motivators, unless you understand their passions, you really can't engage them properly, right? So we went through, we tested it for well over a year. And when you take this motivators assessment, it gives you your ranking of the top of your 23 workplace motivators. Your top 7 are very strong. Your next 7 are moderate. The bottom 9 are neutral. And we found that people's motivators clustered around certain identities. That you were either that you were an achiever, you were a builder, you were a caregiver, you were a thinker, you were reward driven. And as a leader, if I can understand not just who you are and what you're good at, but what you're passionate about, it allows me to engage you, to put you in the place where you can be really productive. And I want to let you know that if you go to our website, thecultureworks.com/motivation, right? You can actually buy this assessment online. Now, regularly it's $40 American, and it does the conversion for you. But in the end, when you go to buy it, you have that discount code. You've done it on Amazon and whatnot. If you type in Chester, because of this webinar, we wanted to give you a great discount. That $40 assessment is only $10. And then if we can become friends on LinkedIn, I would love to hear what you think about the assessment. And if you'd like to share it with me, and I'll share with you mine. My biggest motivator is friendship. I love to meet people from different cultures all over the world, and I'd love to make your acquaintance. And so if you find that to be interesting, go ahead, put in my name, Chester, take the assessment. It's only $10. And you can have your team take the assessment. And then compare notes. What do we have in common? What do we have that's unique? What do we have that we don't have in common, so that we can build these high-performance teams? Well, hopefully you've had some nice takeaways. 3 things that you can do tomorrow. What's my ratio? Am I handwriting my notes? Am I doing it often? Am I specific? Am I sincere? Right? Those kinds of things that can help you build the kind of culture that you want. My dad. This is a picture of my dad, John Dalton Elton. He was my first manager and my best friend. And I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, up in Canada. He's teaching me how to skate. And I will tell you, of all the things that my father taught me, and there were many, the one thing that he shared with me that really stuck with me was this. He said, Chess, every day you be good to everybody, because everybody's having a tough day. You see, the thing I loved about my father was he treated, the parking lot attendant, the receptionist, with the same dignity and the same appreciation as he did of captains of industry, presidents and CEOs of organizations. To my father, everybody mattered, everybody was important. And that's, I think, a great lesson for business. In our businesses, everybody matters, or they wouldn't be there. And there isn't anyone that doesn't want to feel valued. Again, remember the definition. I believe what I do matters, and I make a difference. And when I make a difference, it's noticed and it's celebrated. So great lessons from my dad. Well, again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm an influencer there. Adrian and I write a couple of articles a month. It's all free. Feel free to make comments, reach out and connect. I'd love to make a new friend, and I'd love to hear about what some of your challenges are in businesses and how I can help, or our books and some of the things we do can help. Remember, a great culture is where I believe what I do matters, I make a difference, and when I make a difference, it's noticed and it's celebrated. Everybody deserves a great place to work, and these are ways, hopefully, that you can start implementing today and tomorrow to make where you work a great place to work. Well, Ali, we wanted to save about 15 minutes for Q&A and a little conversation, so we're at 46 past the hour. I'll turn it back to you, and you and I can have a little conversation here as we wrap up. Remember, great offer on the What Motivates Me. Hope that you'll look at all our books. We had great fun writing all of them, and hopefully it'll make a difference. Feel free to connect with me at chester@thecultureworks.com if you've got any questions you think about after the webinar is over. Well, Ali, it's back to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chester. A very, very interesting and intriguing presentation, I must say. And before we proceed to the question and answer, I would like to wish you and your wife a very happy wedding anniversary. I believe it's the 32nd one which you have mentioned, and that's may you have many, many more to come.
Thank you very much. We do. We have a great marriage. My father always said, the key to happiness is to marry above your station. And when he met my wife, he said, son, you've done well.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, now, folks, we are open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you can put it in the question box, which I already noticed there are a couple of them already posted. Or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console. You could raise it, and I will unmute you so you can have direct audio with Mr. Chester Elton. I noticed some of you have rather pasted lengthy questions or comments, so I would appreciate if you could raise your hand and you can be specific in your questions. But let me move to the question box. There's a first question from Zohan. The question is, what do you recommend as an appropriate approach in instilling a new organization culture?
Okay, so you're starting a new business, and what would be the first steps to create the culture you want? Is that the question?
Yes, sir. That's in a new form. Yeah.
Excellent question. And whether it's a new organization where you're building a company from scratch, or you're a new leader coming into a new group, I think the way you start is very, very important. This is a very insightful question. And what I recommend that you do is you decide what are going to be the three things that you want to focus on, particularly. We found a great leader. His name is Scott O'Neill, and had an uncanny ability to create wonderful and productive teams very quickly. And he used what he calls the rule of three. He said, people can remember three things. After that, it gets kind of blurry. I work with organizations, and they say, look, we've got, 12 core values. And it's just too much, right? I joked with them. I said, 12 core values is too many. Moses only had 10. Right? So keep things simple, particularly in a new organization. And here's a tip for you. What Scott O'Neill would do is he'd say, look, our rule of three is going to be this. Everything we do is going to be world class. And then he meets with his team and says, what does that mean? What does world class look like? Secondly, he says, we're going to have no surprises. And what he means by that is we're going to have a great communication. Most surprises in business aren't positive. And then three is we're going to cheer for each other. Now, I'm going to, can you still see my screen there, Ali?
Yes, indeed, we can see it.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. Let me go back to the, this is going to be a little bit of a blur here. Let me go back to the roadmap. So if you think about what Scott O'Neill's saying, he says, okay, we're going to be world-class, no surprises, and we're going to cheer for each other, okay? So take a look at this roadmap of engagement, okay? So you've got engaged, enabled, and energized. We're cheering for each other, step 6. No surprises. I'm going to partner with my talent. I'm going to share everything, right? One of the things that we're going to be world-class in is we're going to focus on our customers. So you can take this roadmap and boil it down to those three things, and then talk to your people about it. What does it mean to be world-class? What does it mean that we communicate that there are no surprises? And what does it mean to cheer for each other? You get your buy-in, you've kept it simple, and you're focused. And if you start off that way, then everybody knows where we're headed, how we're going to get there. And then after that, the key is be consistent. Be consistent in your follow-up. But I think it's a wonderful question because the way you start and the way you start to build a culture is very important. It's very hard to go back and redo things. So start off as positively as you can, and hopefully that was helpful. Does that make sense to you, Ali?
Yes, very well answered. Thank you very much. Let me move to another question we have from Ms. Kathy Kasher. The question is, Step 7 is about accountability. Do you have some high-level tips you can share in this area? We struggle with this.
Yes, and you know what? We've done a lot of work on this step, Ali, because so often in an organization, accountability it becomes a negative thing. I'm holding you accountable. I'm holding you accountable, right? Whereas, if we take step 6 and 7 and put it together, is that let's hold each other accountable for the things we do well as well, right? And I will tell you, some really interesting work is being done on your quarterly reviews or your annual reviews with your employees, which have again become a very negative accountability. So instead of saying, in the classic annual review is, I spend the first 5 minutes telling you how great you are, and then I spend the next 55 minutes telling where you're not so good and where you can improve, right? So interesting work was done around, let's change that dynamic. And let's not just hold our employees accountable, let's hold ourselves accountable. And here are 5 key questions that you can ask. One is, have we kept our promises to you, right? So now I'm not just holding you accountable, I'm holding myself accountable. We recruited you to work for our company, and we made you promises. Maybe it was career development or it was in advancement. Have we kept our promises? 2, tell me what you think we do really well around here. Where do you think our strengths are? 3, do you have any ideas that would help us be better, to improve? 4 is, where would you like to be in 3 to 5 years, right? Taking step 7 and step 5, partnering with your talent. And then question 5 is, have we done anything that might cause you to leave us? If we've got talented people, we want to keep them. So this idea of accountability, if you can turn it around, if you can flip it a little bit, that says, I am going to hold you accountable when things go wrong. Clearly, that's important. But I'm also going to hold you accountable when things go right. And I want you to hold me accountable in that I keep my promises, that you have a place to grow and develop. Back to Carlos Aguilera and the 10 pennies, right? That was his way of holding his people accountable. Now, do you think everything in his world is unicorns and rainbows? No, it's not. He's got to have tough conversations. Things go wrong. People crash cars. They get angry with customers when they shouldn't be. And he's got to have those tough conversations. But if you've had the accountability that's positive, when you have the tough conversation around something that's negative, the person is much more receptive because you've got a bank of goodwill. I know that you're not just going to, every time you show up, hold me accountable in a negative way. You're going to also give me credit for my good work. So, excellent question. We don't have a lot of time to go too deep. But if you can think about taking that negative, what is sometimes a negative connotation in work, I'm always called on the carpet. I'm always held accountable when something goes wrong, but not when it goes right. And make it more of a positive interaction. I think what you'll find is your people will be much more receptive to coaching, and that the messages that you deliver as a manager are going to be much better received. What do you think, Ali?
Well, that's a very good insight. However, just to add up and perhaps ask you, in a group, what if consistent or persistently, if you are appreciating a team member and you still do not see a performance coming up, how do you gradually, say goodbye?
Yeah, no, great question. You give everyone the chance to perform. And I think, this idea of sharing everything, step 4, ongoing communication. If there's a consistent underperformer, you give them the chance, again, as many times as you can afford to perform. But when they can't, then you call them in. Remember the rule of 3, we're world class. And you can say, look, Ali, we talk about being world class. Consistently, we've tried to give you the tools to do your job, and you haven't met your goals. it's tough for me to cheer for you, right? It's tough for me. And at a certain point, you've got to say, look, this just isn't working out. You're not in the right position to perform. You can't perform. We've got to either change your role or we need to say goodbye. Now, this becomes very important, Ali. The way you say goodbye to people says a lot about your culture and sends a message to the rest of your team. If you do it respectfully, if you do it carefully and with dignity, the message is we treat people with dignity here. If you scream and yell at them, put everything you've got in a cardboard box, you're done, you're out, goodbye, don't let the door hit you, on your way out. The message to the rest of the team is, ooh, you see what I'm saying here? So say goodbye with dignity. Now, don't carry non-performers. You can't change people by just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sometimes people are in the wrong position, and that's okay. You give them a chance, you hold them accountable, and if it doesn't work out, you say goodbye with dignity. And the way you say goodbye says a lot about your culture. Be very careful, because if you make a mistake there, you will have people that will say, uh-oh, better for me to leave now than to have that happen, and you may lose some of your top performers. So be careful with that one.
Just to supplement the same, how do you tender an apology to your subordinate if you have screamed them or insulted them in public?
Yeah, well, first off, screaming at people is never a good idea, right? It's never good business. But I will tell you, those leaders that can say, I'm sorry, and apologize, and if it's been a situation where it's kind of an ugly situation, and you've done it publicly, you need to apologize publicly. I find that great leaders can admit when they're wrong. And if you do it and you are humble about it and you're sincere in your apology, that goes a long way to winning people back. So great point, Ali. If you've lost your temper and you've really blown it, be humble, come in the next day, apologize, talk about ways that you hope that will never happen again, make a promise that you'll be more careful next time. But a leader that can admit he or she is wrong, that's a strong leader and that's a confident leader.
Thank you very much. Great answer. Now let me move, as we're running short of time. We have still a couple of questions, so let me try to take the shortest one. Which companies besides Google, that comes first always, that you have surveyed tops the list in work environment?
Yeah, good question. Singapore Airlines has always done a nice job. Apple gets very high marks. A lot of the tech companies are very good about giving people work-life balance and so on. But there are good companies everywhere. There's a restaurant chain here in the United States called Texas Roadhouse that is a wonderful place to work. And again, because they focus on their employees, they make the employee experience extraordinary. They've got employee help funds. If you've had a catastrophic event in your life, you've wrecked your car, or you've had an unexpected expense, they'll come in and they'll help you with that. So I know Google is kind of the gold standard, and sometimes we look to those tech companies, but American Express is a bank, a wonderful culture that's very employee focused. Texas Roadhouse, Singapore Airlines, these are all wonderful cultures. Avis Budget Rental Car, this is a rental car company that really the focus on the employee, they attract great talent, their turnover is low. I mentioned American Express, they've got a call center down in Florida that has single-digit turnover. Call centers generally not really positive places to work, and yet they've cracked the code there. So, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and I can share more of some of these best practices with some of the teams, whoever asked that question, happy to do it for you. There really are some great companies out there. They don't get as much publicity as the bad companies because somehow we're kind of tuned to bad news. But there are some really good ones out there. A lot of them are highlighted in our book, All In. If you have the chance to download that book, there's some great highlights of great places to work there as well.
Thank you. Since you mentioned Apple, we already have one question about Apple. The question is, what are your views about the companies like Apple and others who are outsourcing all their production work to China but not sustaining the same culture as they have built in USA? Um, aren't they passing the cost of building employee engagement on an outsider's cost?
Uh, you know, e- Excellent point. When you talk about outsourcing, that's always tricky, right? Because are you outsourcing your culture? And sometimes it's purely economic. There are functions within your organization that are just less expensive to do in Mexico or Malaysia or Vietnam and so on. I think it's tricky. There's a balance there. If you outsource too much, then you have an outsourced culture, right? And so I think Apple has actually done a pretty good job in keeping the brain, the innovation and so on, in California and in their stores. They've also got a big research center in Canada. So the point I think that's being made here is, as you start to outsource things, can that damage your culture, and can you outsource? And the answer is yes, you can. And that's why, as much as you can keep in-house and as much as you can develop and have control over, the better off your culture is going to be. Sometimes economics just dictate that the cost savings or the profitability of outsourcing is so high that you can't not do it. But the point, I think, of the question is, can outsourcing impact your culture? And the answer is absolutely yes. Be very careful when you do that, because the impact can be irreparable if you don't do it right.
Okay, just one last question, an interesting one about Elvis. You are appreciated. That's an excellent slogan. But how should one make it look genuine, ensuring that we should mean it not only by complimenting or because in return we are anticipating a productive force?
Yeah, no, consistency here is important. If you're a manager that only appreciates once a year, it's hard for people to believe that. But be consistent. Now, the sincerity, I think, comes in the specificity. Tell me exactly what it is I did right. If I come in and I say, "Hey, Ali, great job. You're number one. You're the best. Keep it up." That doesn't mean anything, right? But if I say, "Ali, I love your interaction with the customer there. They came in, they were disappointed. There was a flaw in the product. You walked them through the fix. You repaired it. You left. You took an unhappy customer and made them a happy customer." The more specific you can be, the more of the story you can tell, the more sincere it's going to be. So keep track of the details, tell a specific story, and it will be interpreted as being sincere and meaningful appreciation. And then be consistent with that. Do it on a regular basis. Remember, we talked about frequency. Do it frequently, and then you will build that tradition of appreciation where people believe that what you say is true, and they have a specific roadmap and a sincere roadmap to follow to continue, that world-class behavior. Great questions.
One last question. I know we have other, but this is a very interesting one, and we'll conclude on that. Handwritten notes, can they be replaced by text, SMS, or WhatsApp messages?
Well, the one good thing about a text and an SMS or email or WhatsApp is it's immediate, right? It's immediate, and that's wonderful. I don't think it replaces a handwritten note, and here's why. Because a handwritten note, you took the time, you wrote it out. I've got it in the mail. It's a token. I have it. We don't often print out our texts or emails. But when you've got that handwritten note, it's a tangible work of the hand that I now have in my hand. So I wouldn't discourage you from texting and emailing and WhatsApping and Facebooking. I think that's all great. But make no mistake about it, it doesn't replace something as tangible and as sincere and I think as precious as a handwritten note. Do both. Nothing says it's one or the other. You can do both.
Absolutely, I believe it goes saying that no email, fax, text, WhatsApp can replace a handshake also. So
exactly, a phone call is great. A hug is better, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Elton. I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for taking the time to deliver this live webinar, and a very interactive one indeed. As we can see from the number of questions. A lot of people are actually putting a lot of comments also. If you could, sir, also highlight your email address again, because a couple of them are asking again from where they can connect with you. Perhaps they missed the
Sure.
illustration earlier. So,
Sure. Rather than go through all the slides to get to the end, it's Chester at thecultureworks.com. Or here's an even an easier one. They are linked. It's just Chester at chesterelton.com. I'd love to get your questions. I'd love to interact. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Ali, you've been a wonderful host. Thank you so much. I appreciate you jumping in. I put you on the spot a couple of times, and you answered brilliantly. So I appreciate you as well.
thank you very much for asking easy questions also. No, we really appreciate it. Thank you once again, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again with you, sir. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
You bet. Adrian and I, we love what we do. We're very passionate about creating these great workplaces. But we have found that what works at work also works at home. What's your ratio at home? Is it 5 to 1? Are you writing handwritten notes to your children and people that mean a lot to you? Don't leave all your good work at work. Be sure to bring that home as well. And I promise you, not only can you create a great culture at work, you can create a great culture at home. And that's really what we should be most worried about, right? Creating great families and great personal lives. So hopefully you'll take what we talked about today and apply it at home as well.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed it. And once again, really want to thank you on behalf of the Mile and for this time and for this presentation. Folks, we are recording this webinar, and you can also download the presentation link, which will be emailed to you, but you can write down it's community.mile.org or webinar.mile.org. Please stay tuned to download the presentation. And we really want to thank all of those who participated in this webinar and for posting very interesting questions. With that note, I would like to conclude.
Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.